There was a parenting decision Gen X parents made every single Saturday that would now be considered possibly a federal crime. Nobody thought twice about it. Mom pulls up, hands you $10. Be back at the store at 6. Don't get kidnapped. That was the entire parenting strategy. And then she's gone. 11 years old, no phone. We called this a normal Saturday, and we called this a trip to the mall. You walk through those doors and the smell hits you instantly. Pretzels, Cinnabon, carpet, something from Spencer Gifts you could never quite identify and probably shouldn't have been breathing. That smell meant one thing. You were free, and the next few hours were all yours. Past the fountain, the stores started to mean something. If you were trying to look like you had recently escaped from a music video, there was Chess King, parachute pants, shoulder pads so big you could land a small aircraft on them. Then there were the stores you weren't supposed to be in. Spencer Gifts. Okay, Spencer's requires a moment. It was dark in there. Why was it dark? Blacklight posters of howling wolves, lava lamps, novelty items of a nature I cannot fully describe in this particular video. You pretended to look at keychains while absolutely not looking at the stuff in the back. The stuff in the back was the entire reason that you went in. We all knew it. Spencer Gifts knew it. The teenager working the counter knew it. Nobody said anything. That was the deal. The bookstore was working the same angle. It was where you went to look at magazines, which was the most strategically important location in the entire mall for an 11-year-old boy. You weren't reading. You were standing very specifically in front of a very specific rack, trying to look casual while attempting to absorb information about the world that nobody was going to explain to you any other way. The bookstore raised a generation of boys, and the bookstore did not get paid for it. Girls were reading the dirty parts of V.C. Andrews' books and pretending they were sophisticated. If the bookstore was where we learned about the world, the record store was where we figured out how we wanted to be in it. I want to be careful here because I don't want to be dramatic. But the record store was one of the greatest places that has ever existed. We would wander in and spend forever flipping through the bins like we knew music. Most of us didn't. The 19-year-old behind the counter knew music, and he'd take the time to explain to you why the B-side was actually the most important. Listening stations were the best part. You could preview tracks before blowing your last $3 on a tape that might turn out to be trash. We discovered new bands and secretly hoped that cute person from the other school in your section saw that you were looking at the new Depeche Mode album. But none of that mattered once you walked into the arcade. The combined noise of 50 different games all running simultaneously, Pole Position, Pac-Man, Galaga, Defender if your mall was fancy, Dragon's Lair if your mall had money, a room full of kids spending their last quarters with the focused intensity of people doing something that mattered. Because it did matter. It mattered enormously. The high score on Donkey Kong at your local arcade was an actual ranking system that the entire neighborhood understood. You knew who held it. You knew the kid who was good enough to put his initials on the leaderboard, and you respected him in a way you have never respected anyone since. 3 letters, forever immortalized until somebody beat it. You could spend an entire afternoon in there and come out with nothing except the specific satisfaction of having gotten further than you did last time. And that was enough. That was actually everything. There's the arcade, the stores, the food, but none of it was actually the point. The point was who you might run into. You'd walk the same loop over and over, and then it happened. You rounded the corner in front of Sam Goody, and there they are, the person. And you have about 4 seconds to decide. Are you making eye contact or suddenly very interested in the window display of Walden books?
There she is. Okay, just look up. It's not a big deal. Come on, Evan, just eyes. You can do eyes.
Most of us chose Walden books. This is where we figured things out. Awkward, unsupervised, real. Hearts mildly broken outside of Sam Goody. Friendships made by the fountain. Identity formed through bad fashion choices and high scores on Dig Dug. And when we ran out of energy to keep walking the loop, there was always one place left to go. The food court. Orange Julius. A drink that was somehow both a juice and a milkshake, and neither of those things simultaneously. Or Sparrow pizza that somehow tasted better because it was under heat lamps for 6 hours. You could sit there for an hour with one drink and a pile of paper napkins and nobody bothered you. The food court was where you went when your money was almost gone, but you weren't ready to go home yet. And nobody was ready to go home yet. But eventually we did, and one day we stopped coming back. And here's the part nobody prepared us for. The mall didn't announce that it was leaving. It was there, and then it was slightly less there. One store closed, then another. The record store became a phone case kiosk. The arcade became a Verizon. Spencer's hung on. Of course, Spencer's hung on. Spencer's will outlast everything. But peak 1980s and early 90s mall glory, man, that was the Gen X mall experience. A chaotic, fluorescent paradise of questionable fashion choices, teenage drama, and food that probably shortened our lives but tasted like heaven. We grew up there and it led us, without asking anything in return except a quarter for the arcade and maybe an Orange Julius if it was a good week. That was a good deal. That was the best deal anyone ever got. Okay, fellow mall rats, tell me in the comments, what was the one store you went to without fail? And if you say Sears, I don't believe you. Drop your highest arcade score too. I want to see who actually had the moves. Subscribe for more Gen X memories that cost $10 and lasted all afternoon.